It's that time of year for CiderCon, the annual conference hosted by the American Cider Association. This year it's taking place in Oregon. And what's a little unique about this year is that there is a good storm that has happened running right up to the weekend, right before CiderCon. So as folks are flying in from all directions or traveling in their vans, I think even, having to stop along the way because of this storm from what I'm seeing, I'm bringing you a little bit of what is happening on my trail to CiderCon. I flew in on Thursday, January 11th, and got a car and headed down to Eugene, Oregon. Before then, I stopped with Michelle McGrath, the executive director, or I should say the CEO of the American Cider Association, at her office, which is at a co-workspace, which is a neat little scene that a lot of folks are doing these days. And she was very kind to help me out with a podcast recording room where I'm doing a number of interviews coming up. From there, I headed down to Eugene to meet with Sean Kelly of Wildcraft Cider Works, and there'll be an upcoming episode with him. On Saturday morning, I was scheduled to head out towards Florence, which is a town right on the Oregon coast, directly west of Eugene. Now, on any other day, it wouldn't have been much of a drive, about an hour and a half, really pretty and all that, but it was kind of like the ice storm apocalypse taking place in the wee hours of Saturday morning. I found a little window around 6 a.m. to head out, got up at 5, took a half hour to shovel off the ice that was already forming, and kind of wondering the whole time, am I doing the right thing, and why didn't I get insurance on this car? Regardless, I figured I'll go a little bit and see if I have some traction. I had plenty of traction, so let's go. But I just want to add one more thing. I also had a case of cider that Sean Kelly set me up with, and I put that and all my luggage on the rear wheels as far back into the trunk as possible, trying to get a little weight there. And so I am calling this here episode Cider Saves once again. So we headed out, me and my case of cider and the Talking Palms, rolling up the road towards Florence. And it is kind of going upwards. You're getting some elevation there, and you have to go over to this one pass. An incredible journey. I do have some clips on Instagram of that. I'll actually post one little video. I got to figure it all out. I got a lot of material here because it was one of those experiences that I will never forget, truthfully, that drive and just keeping it really slow and steady, having to keep the heat high blast because the wiper blades are freezing. If you haven't experienced that kind of storm before, good for you, because you don't really want to if you don't have to. Anyhow, I made it, and I'm still feeling elated from that experience. Finally made it to the coast where the temperatures rose up to 40, and ice was flying off of my car now. And I was able to just drop into the coast, which reminds me quite a bit of Big Sur in California. My goal is to head up to an area called Depot Bay, where I'm talking right now from. I'm staying at a place called Trawler's Lodge. And, it's a little like kitchenette, one-story motel that has been really well taken care of. And I have a nice view of the ocean to boot. So I do recommend this place, even though I have no power here. I arrived into Depot Bay, and before checking in, I knew that there was a little wine bar that also served cider. And I met Joey, who is the owner, and I tried some of the Pinot Noir, because this region of the world is really well known for Pinot and Pinot Grigio. And I was talking to him, and about 15 minutes after he poured me a glass, the power went out in Depot Bay. And I've been out of power for the past 24 hours. And that meant no cell service, no way to kind of check in, let people back home know that, I have safely landed. But truthfully, people have no idea. Like, we get very insular, don't we, that there's different things going on in the world. But I'll tell you, it is happening right now, this weekend of January, 13th, 14th. in Oregon proper, up by Portland. I'm hearing that they have snow. Maybe it's going to be ice on top. There's a lot of trees down. I've been dodging them on the highway. Obviously, the power is out, so something fell on that, and the crews are working the best they can. My plan for today is to next head up north. I wanted to get to Cannon Beach. This is kind of like a bucket list for me to check out the Oregon coast. I've driven most of the coast on the west coast here. Still got to get down to the Humboldt region and go north from San Francisco along the coast. But the Oregon coast, no. And I like to come back when the weather's nice and I could really walk on the beaches. But today, luckily, the storm has passed on this side of this amazing coastline, and I'm seeing some blue out in the sky right now. There's no more rain cranking down. Even the wind has died down, so I might be able to get down onto the water. I'm going to keep on bringing you some little clips here from my journey up to probably Wednesday of CiderCon. I have a tour that's supposed to go out on Tuesday, but I think it's going to be stormy and icy then, so we'll see what happens. Part of the tours of CiderCon, and bring you hopefully some clips from those tours. Anyhow, wherever you are out there in the world, I hope that you, like me, have your feet kicked up right now, maybe having a nice little view and a spot of cider to enjoy the day ahead. And if not, there's one in your future. My name is Rhea Windcaller. I am the producer and cider MC at Cider Chat, a weekly podcast. And this is episode 396, and we are counting up to episode 400. I'll return next with some more reporting out on the Oregon Cider Trail. Well, good morning, Portland, and the rest of Ciderville. It is a brisk morning, about 15 degrees. When I woke up, maybe it went up to 18. The crows are happy. I'm doing my walk to the Hyatt right now because I stayed up for a couple nights in the neighborhood, primarily because I had to do some recording and didn't have a space at the conference itself. And it's actually really nice today, despite the fact that all the tours got canceled. So far, things are looking up. And I'm going to cross the road here quickly, because I'll tell you, these roads are not managed whatsoever at all. And so it's freaking cold. And music in the background. This is outside of a Walgreens where they're playing music to deter people from sleeping here. And now 2024, sign of the times. There are 2 tents up against a drugstore, and they play music 24/7. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yeah, kind of makes me, that music gets a little hop in my step. There's a tour going out today at 10:30, and so a couple tours were canceled. The Olympic Peninsula tours did go out. Haven't heard any reports yet. Heard from Elizabeth Ryan at Stone Ridge Cider, and she was up there. I don't know how it's going. I'm sure it looks great because of all the photos. And what's going to happen for the Willamette tour that was supposed to go down towards the Salem area, Bauman's, Raw, a couple of places. And it said Christine Walters, who is probably going to be like the MVP for this leg of CiderCon, because she really came through and set up a mini tour for all of us who are hanging out. I mean, truthfully, with all the cider folks here, it's going to be fine either way because, you know, look, we deal with freezing temperatures, climate change, this being one of the examples of it, and certainly with a whole bunch of cider in Portland, which is like the biggest city in the U.S. for cider consumption, as you could see on the shelves. And by the way, if you haven't gone to the at Cider Chat Ciderville Instagram page yet, you might want to check it out because I've been doing little mini reels of each day as I can. I'm not sure if that's going to continue because It's late nights and I gotta kind of focus at the job at hand. And the job at hand is going to be doing some recording. So let's see what I could get today. It's a little bit of a change up, but just bringing you a little audio snapshot. For the morning, Tuesday morning, sun is out. I just saw a little tiny rainbow, but sounds like storms are coming. Winter in the Northern Hemisphere. This morning, which was January 16th, so that's Tuesday morning of CiderCon week, we were meeting up at the hotel lobby to check in about the tour. The tour to the Willamette Valley had been canceled due to the upcoming weather. So instead, they pulled it together, and I have a feeling that Christine Walters of Bomb and Cider had a real big part in this. In fact, I nominate Christine as the MVP of the day for everything that she did, because it was outstanding. We stayed close to town and did a ride down to the cider bar that is known as The Place. And there was a good opportunity then to have the makers, instead of us going to them, they came to us. So I'm going to be playing you a couple of clips from the makers with the little bit of audio of what they said. Not the full thing, but just to give you a little bit of taste of the day. So we're going to roll to the first cider maker and hear a little bit about what he's doing.
My name is Eliseo Bell Uribe, and I'm the owner of Heartland Cider Works, based in Rickreall, Oregon.
He's going to tell you about his project and what he's doing. He has won... Sorry, that was me. He has won quite a few awards lately.
So today I've got 5 ciders, although 2 of them are just different homages of the same blend. Slightly different because agriculture is always a little bit different year to year, but mostly the same apples. So the very first cider I made was called the Avalon. That was our 2022 cider. All of our stuff is supposed to be very traditionally made. I don't have a lot of equipment to be able to use because we're just in our second year in production. But our first cider is a traditional dry, somewhat like an English style. I wouldn't say it's exactly full-on English style, but very traditional, higher acid, higher tannins, pretty high ABV at 8%, so that one's pretty strong. This next year, the Avalon is not quite as strong, slightly more sweeter, so more of like a semi-dry than like off-dry. Slightly different apples, but still pretty same flavor. That cider got bronze at Glencap as a finalist for the Good Food Award, so that's really cool. Our second cider is a low-alcohol cider, what I like to call an enhanced ciderkin. So, I'm assuming most people know what a ciderkin is. So, instead of a normal ciderkin, I add some crabapple juice just to give it some extra flavor and, just make it not quite as thin as maybe like a normal ciderkin. So, adds a little ABV as well, and then back-sweetened it with some bittersweet juice from some other pressing. The third set, and that one's called the Little Apple, 3.65%, and semi-dry, even though it does have a decent amount of residual sugar, so the flavor of it just kind of balances well to kind of taste more semi-dry than sweet. But fairly light and bubbly, very refreshing, probably more for the summer, when people are hanging out, drinking more at one time. Third cider is supposed to be more of like a French style, so more bittersweet apples with some other sharps as well. Semi-sweet, higher tannins, full body, kind of an earthy taste, and, very fruity esters. And then our final cider, and that one's called, sorry, my French isn't great, but it's called Tomber dans les pommes, which is a saying in French, which means falling into apples. So I just thought that was kind of funny. And then our final cider is a barrel-fermented single varietal made of sweet Alford apples and fermented in a bourbon barrel. That one's a very small release, only about 45 gallons made, and like just about 21 cases in our 12-ounce stubby bottles. That is on the semi-sweet side with just really nice oak characteristics, and I'm really pumped for that one. When we were bottling it, just me and my wife a couple weeks ago, we did some tasting it as we're going. It was just really fantastic. So that one is probably what I'm most excited for this year. Just wish I had more of it to sell.
Say a little more about that apple, Sweet Alfred.
Sweet Alfred. So I actually don't know a ton of it about it, but it is a bittersweet from the UK, known to be a vintage quality apple. So going into it, I didn't know too much about it other than my orchardist in Sweet Home saying that she has it, and I looked it up and I was like, well, it's a vintage quality apple, so it has to be pretty good. So I just kind of took a shot in the dark and decided to go for it, and it's just, I'm really happy with how it is. Lower acid, kind of light on the tannin, so not super strong. It's not something like a Frequin Rouge where you just have tons of tannin coming at you, but it's really nice and balanced, and with a bit of sweetness, I think it turns out really well. And all of our apples are sourced from the Willamette Valley. I'm trying to go as local as I possibly can, and trying to get more traditional apples, heirloom U.S. and bitter sharps and bitter sweets.
Can you tell us about your bottles?
Yeah, so can I grab one of the Avalon? So I specifically chose a smaller format bottle, mainly just to kind of keep the price point per bottle lower, because with more expensive fruit and production, it's just the price of this cider is going to be more expensive than something you can buy like Safeway or Costco. So I knew that the prices were going to be a little bit more expensive, so I specifically went for a smaller bottle, and I just really like the stubby bottle style, and I thought it would give it a little bit more, it'd be a little bit different on the shelf. Like, there are some around there, but you don't really see that many stubby bottles, except for like maybe Coors Banquet, or if you're around here, maybe it's owned by Full Sail now. I'm forgetting what it's called. But up in Hood River, there's a...
Who designed your apple?
So I came up with the general idea a while back, but my brother did the design. He's very much better at graphic design and art history than I am. I'm not very artistically gifted, but my brother designed it, and I was very happy with how it turned out. I was going for just a low poly design. But yeah, I think he did a really good job. Let's see. And then we do have one more cider that's not quite ready yet. That'll be our first cider that's going into cans. That's more of a modern cider. That's a special project where it was a community collab. So I harvested by hand, me, my wife, and my mother harvested a bunch of fruit from in and around the Salem area. Got way more than I really thought I would. I thought I'd get like 250 gallons. Turned out to be almost 1,000, which for my scale, that's 2/3 of my production for this year. And just that batch is 4 times more than my production last year. So quite a bit larger than what I'm currently doing. And then that's mostly going to go into cans. A little bit will be kegged, and the profits from that are going to be donated to my local Boys and Girls Club. So something that's like 2 blocks away from my house. I went there as a kid, and just giving back to my local community and supporting an organization I really believe in.
Up next is Oregon cider maker Levi Danielson of Raw Cider Company.
We're pouring the sparkling Perry. This is a pretty special project for me. I really love Perrys and just all the flavor and complexity that you can get from pears outside of the culinary fruit that is dominating the market, of course. I took over management of this orchard 3 years ago, and it's 55-year-old Anjous and Bartletts, and I don't really care about the Bartletts at all, but the Anjous can make a pretty good Perry if they're mixed with a little bit of Perry pears, or in this case, wild forage pears from the woods in Oregon. And those things are like tannic and acid bombs. So I can use a little bit to make the anjus more interesting. If I could use a higher percentage of Perry pears or wild forage pears, I would. But that's why I'm grafting onto this mature orchard so that I can get those varieties turned around in a faster time than planting new plantings. So I'm looking at it about 3 years versus 7 years. And time will tell quantities and all of that sort of stuff. So the other thing that really interests me about the wild forage pears is that I see the culinary fruit industry and all the inputs they put on their orchards. These varieties are naturally adapted to the climate in Oregon, and they're beautiful. They don't have codling moth stings, they don't have psylla and a lot of the other issues that plague the dessert fruit industry. And my vision is really just to have a lower input orchard so it's easier to manage. You can still get high quality fruit, and it's just a little bit cleaner and better than something that's heavily cultivated. That orchard is in White Salmon, Washington, so right across the river from Hood River. It's the biggest pear growing region in the United States. Oregon's kind of split between that and then the Rogue River Valley, where there's a lot of pears in southern Oregon as well. So this isn't as complex as a lot of straight Perry pears that you'd find. It does have that astringent end that I really like and enjoy. There's absolutely no sugar in this, no residual sugar. The sweetness that you're tasting is all from sorbitol that's naturally occurring in pears. And I like that because I can have a completely dry product. I'm not pasteurizing this one, and it still remains balanced with that sorbitol sweetness. And I think that's an angle that I'm going to continue to play with my Perries. I really like that about being able to balance the sweetness without pasteurizing or adding any juice or sugar to them. And this is a traditional method. It was aged in the bottle for 8 months, and then it was that was disgorged in November. The process for orcharding and pressing, so my business is basically split almost 50-50 between apples and pears. And then most of the pears coming from this orchard that I manage, I buy some Perry pears in the market again to make my products more interesting. And then the other portion of apples are from another orchard that I manage where the tasting room and production space is. And then I purchase fruit from a few other growers in the Willamette Valley as well.
These clips were just from the first part of the tour. We then got back on the bus and headed over to a location that was recently a brewery, but it closed. And what's so interesting about it is Christine Walters of Bauman Cider purchased this location and are now moving their production towards Portland. It is currently at Bauman's farm, and that's a family farm scene, and the cider portion of it was growing so quickly that it was kind of taxing the system there. So they are now going to be moving up to Portland at this beautiful site. And we went into the tasting room, and she was pouring us some really wonderful ciders there also. And along the way, she told us this really fun story about a maker that we all know by the name of Tom Oliver. So I'm going to roll to that clip next that was recorded while we were on the bus headed to her new production site.
I was heading, and I've been over to Tom's a couple of times, like on tours and trips to England. And I was going to be in England, and I texted Tom and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be in England. I'd love to grab lunch if you're around. I'll come to Herefordshire." And he said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to be in Spain that week." So the next time I was there, I texted him again. I said, "I'm coming back again. Maybe we could have lunch this time." And he said, "You know what? Do you fancy a road trip?" And I said, "I do fancy a road trip. That's exactly what I fancy." And so Tom, his other life is as a tour manager for the Proclaimers. So he's a pretty good logistics guy. And he said, if you don't mind, I will take care of it. I'll take care of the arrangements. I'll make the accommodations and do all that. And I said, get it. It's your country. So I get there, and I met him at the London Cider House, where he had just gotten the keys to take over the London Cider House. So that's now Tom Oliver's venture in partnership with a couple other cider folk and maybe a cheesemonger. But it was a very special day. They were signing papers and doing the, cheersing and cheesing and all of that. And then we set out on the train for the first leg and did this trip around England, the whole countryside, and it was absolutely mind-blowing to be in the presence of Tom Oliver, all the while just advocating for the cider industry and going out. We met with, cider maker after cider maker out in the countryside, and it was such a treat, such a delight to meet these cider makers who had the most respect for Tom and what he does, and then by proxy they were so generous to me and opened their doors and showed us everything. We had the most amazing time and a whole week of touring around England with Tom Oliver. And the next time I saw him was at in Bristol at the Bristol Cider Salon, and a few of us cider makers were hanging out, and he said, Christine, I made you a cider, and unfortunately the labels weren't done yet, so I didn't get to bring it to you, but I will get you that cider. And I didn't really think much of it, whatever. So then when I saw him at CiderCon, actually he sent me a photo of him wearing a Bauman Cider t-shirt that I had given him on the road trip, and holding this bottle right here. And I just saw the t-shirt and I said, oh great, you're my new cellar hand, get over here, I need you now. And I didn't zoom in on it or anything, and then I forwarded it to a friend who had been there in Bristol with us, and who zoomed in on it, and he said, holy shit, Christine, he did it. And this cider is Christine's Smile, bottle conditioned, made in Herefordshire. And I honestly teared up and thought, this is the pinnacle of my cider making career. I've never done anything better than inspiring this cider. And it truly, I might be a little biased, but I think it's the best cider you've ever had. It's really incredible, and truly, that's what cider friends are all about right there. And so I took this last harvest in 23, and I harvested the lees from one of those bottles, and I grew them, and then I inoculated a batch of our estate apples, Foxwhelp heavy, because Tom is a big Foxwhelp guy, and I made this cider that's called Do You Fancy a Road Trip? And when Tom got to town last week, I gave him a bottle of this, and on the back is a little ode to Tom Oliver, and I made him cry, so job done. Thank you. So this facility that we're going to, I've been on the farm for 8 years now. It's the farm I grew up on. We've always grown apples my whole life. My family homesteaded there in 1895 and planted the orchards, built the barn, did all the things that homesteaders do. And what I didn't know is that my great-grandfather actually made hard cider on the farm, because that's what everybody did back then. Made hard cider. I was unaware of it, and he did it in that fashion where I've been told this story of hard cider and why they call it hard, and it was because you put it in the barrel, it ferments, you check back in a few months, you drink it and you drink it and you drink it and you drink it throughout the winter and in the spring, and it's light and it's bubbly and it's zingy and sweet in the beginning, and then it gets less so, and then it's pretty darn hard to drink at the end because it's pretty oxidized. It's, I'm sure, Acetobacter, all the wondrous microbes that get in there, and it's quite difficult by the end of the barrel. And then your next batch comes in, you press your apples in the fall and fill it all over again. So when I started making cider and as a hobbyist, and I told my dad, oh, this is so great, and he was like, oh, I don't know, I tasted great grandpa's cider, and I was like, wait a minute, great grandpa's cider? Grandpa made cider here on the farm. I had no idea. The barrels were still there, but of course they were in bad shape. So we don't use those barrels, but the heritage was there, and I was like, I want to do it just like he did. Well, that didn't work out because it's no good, right? But anyways, that was my kind of start of making cider on the farm. We started in a corner, and then we grew and grew, and every year I'm like, can I have a little more space and a little more space? It's a big family farm. We grow apples and hazelnuts and peaches and pears and caneberries and seed crops, and we have a farm stand that's quite large. And people always say when they come visit, you didn't tell me it was this big. So I'm telling you, it's that big. It's a big farm stand. We are 1,000 acres under cultivation between seed crops and fresh fruits and vegetables, and we sell almost all of it right there at the farm stand. So it's a real little thing, and we have a scratch bakery and a coffee shop in there, and now cider tasting, but it's very rustic, and my family continues to think that maybe it's not going to work out and that cider is a fad, so they haven't really invested much into it's like a little kegerator where they pour some glasses grudgingly. And anyways, so fast forward, this last harvest was the biggest apple harvest I've seen in my entire life. It was so many apples, probably double the amount of apples we picked last year. It was crazy, and I know I apologize to the East Coasters who got wiped out. I am so sorry. We would have happily shipped you apples. Like every time I have all these relationships with local orchardists who I say, I'll take all your cider apples, I'll take all your McIntosh, I'll take all your, whatever. And this year they just kept coming and coming and coming. My team was like, we can't, all of our tanks are full, all of our IBCs are full, all of our bottles are full. We have no more room for any more apples, but you can't very well say, throw your apples away, and we are kind of the big producer down in that area, and so we had so many apples. We probably pressed and froze 30 IBCs of juice this year, and not dessert juice, but like legit amazing cider apple juice. So that's how bountiful a year it was. But in all of that, between the pressing and the particulate that comes from the press and the industrial waste from making cider of that many apples, we overtaxed our septic system on the farm. So all of our drain fields were clogged up and flooded, and it was a bit of a mess. And my after harvest was over, we had picked our last apples, and it was this moment of like, all the apples are in, all the apples are pressed, and I thought that we would have a family meeting, and my cousins and aunt and uncle would high five and be like, you really killed it this year, so much cider. And instead they were like, you gotta get off the farm, you're killing us. Like, the septic system was a problem, and the well was dry in August, and so it was a moment of like, oh, this is not what anybody wants, is to hurt the farm in the long term, the ecosystem of the farm. So at that point we did some quick shuffling and math, and said, we'll find a place in the city, and we will begin making our big modern batches in the city, and on the farm we'll reserve that for small batch, barrel series, amphora, that sort of thing. And so that's what we've done, and this is what we found, kind of a turnkey operation, which you'll see is pretty mind-blowing how perfect it was. I said I've got to find about 10,000 square feet. I need floor drains, and I need a glycol loop, because the plan is to go back to the farm to build a facility that can handle the level of industrial waste, a system, because the farm system was never meant to handle industrial waste. It was meant to handle washing berries, right, and selling them out the front door. So now we can build that with the mindfulness of who we want to be and the size we want to be. In the meantime, this was a turnkey operation. It's 9,850 square feet, which was just like, thank you for that. So we're gonna go in. We'll go right into the tap room, and after we have a couple drinks, then we can do some tours in the production part of it. The tap room is not open. I've had the keys about 2 weeks. It's a mess. I've been working for the last 2 weeks to clean it, and it's where we've all been surviving, showering, making coffee since I've been out of power at my house. Jan could tell you. So I welcome you all, and please grant us grace for the mess that it is.
Wonderful. Thank you. from there, we headed back to the hotel where the lobby was filled up with cider friends. It was just, I just can't tell you enough how awesome it was to see everybody, to see old friends and make new friends. We hung out in the lobby for quite a while. We saw everybody from the UK, from other countries across the US. And while I was sitting there, well, I had a nice long conversation with Monique, who is a cider maker at Yonder Cider. And that was really nice to catch up with her and what she's doing. And then I met up with all the UK makers, and as I was sitting there and looking out the window, I saw this car drive up, and out of the car, well, let me start before the driver who got out. The car itself was completely encased in ice. It was probably about 3 inches thick in the front. You couldn't even see like how any air could go into the front grill, making one wonder, like, how did the car do that? Like, was it getting enough air to like just, keep the radiator going? But I guess maybe when you're encased in ice, it doesn't matter. It was something like you would see on the top of Mount Everest. And better yet, out of the car stepped a friend from Southern Oregon, and his name is Anders. And Anders I met originally on one of the French cider tours. And he and his wife, Akina, just lovely people. And I was just so excited. It was just like surprise and running across. And so there's a lot of that. And actually, there's still a lot of that to come, because tomorrow is Wednesday, January 17th. And that is the beginning of some of the different seminars that are taking place. And I'll be doing quite a bit of recording to continue to bring you some of these amazing stories from makers all over the map, which means I should be heading to bed now and getting some good night's sleep, because I think the first interview tomorrow morning is going to be with Johan of Pomelagique. It's a cidery based in Sweden. And I know he's going to be bringing us up to date on some of the fun stuff that's happening for the cider culture there. But before I go, I do want to say that the French Cider Tour, the reservation line is now open. Go to CiderChat.com, go to the tab that says Totally Cider Tours. You'll get to see the itinerary and to reserve your space now. There is limited space. This tour is filling up very quickly. So I want to encourage you, if you've ever had a thought of going to France, I cannot guarantee that this tour will go next year. It may not. And so this is your opportunity now to have a fully curated tour and experience France at its best. So again, check that out at CiderChat.com. And as always, thanks to all the fine patrons of Cider Chat who help support this podcast and bring it on the air to you each and every week for the past 8 years. You too can become a patron by joining the Cider Chat Patreon page. You'll find a link at CiderChat.com or just Google Patreon. That's spelled Patreon and Cider Chat, and it'll bring you right there. This is Rio and Collar signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards,
having some fun.
There is a reason.
There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh yeah.
We like cider.
Oh yes, we do.
We like palm.
Oh yes, we do.
We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh yeah.
We like cider.
Ba-da-da-dum.
We like palm.
Oh yes, we do.
We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!